Okay, so this is another submitted question. It is, how do I cope with not belonging in my community? This person goes on to say, talk about how he does stand up, and the most painful thing is not feeling valued by the majority of comedians in my scene. I have to feel like I put on a certain kind of face. And earlier in the year, he was being removed from lineups. How do I accept that people in my community scene will never like me for whatever reason without hurting my career chances? How do I accept that the people in my local comedy scene, will never like me for whatever reason without hurting my chances? So this is interesting because, well, there's a couple of things. You had two questions. How do I cope with not belonging in my community? Well, let's just tackle that one first, and then we'll go to the last part, which is how do I accept that people in my local comedy scene will never like me for whatever reason. Okay, how do I cope with not belonging in my community? I would say that if you aren't belonging in your community, there's two things happening. On one level, you might be like self-rejecting. So when you meet people, if the thought in your head is, well, I don't belong in this community, then that's kind of what you're bringing into interactions. And I would say that due to just like natural human confirmation bias, you're going to prime yourself to have interactions with people that validate that bias. So, for instance, a dating example might be a guy walks up to a girl. She's going to reject him. He knows it. So before he goes up to her, he's super nervous and does things to ultimately make her feel uncomfortable, and she rejects him. So the idea of how do I cope with not belonging in my community? I'm not saying that you haven't gotten indicators that in some way you aren't as welcome as others comparatively, but I would say that the idea that you don't belong in your community is a unhelpful one and is not entirely true and is just vague enough to not have to take responsibility for. So I would argue that it's not that you don't belong in your community, it's that you haven't found a way to relate or find a place in your community that meets your expectations for connection. So where do we go from there? Well, I would say on one level my thoughts would be just to experiment. And I'm sure that you've already done this, but I've been to new cities. Oh man, I went to new cities all through my 20s, and I spent hard years or first 6 months not having any friends and trying to find my place and going from one friend group and thinking, this isn't really right, this sucks, until you eventually find people that kind of resonate with you. What I would say as the first line of defense against this is to stop trusting so much of the narrative in your thought that you've constructed, because you're gathering evidence in a biased way, and it's working against you for no real benefit to you subjectively. What I would also say is that you should open yourself up to the idea that there could be people that accept you, that B, it is something that's supposed to take time, and that you're not weird or abnormal for not being able to find your niche in a community. There's a lot of people that feel that way. And I would say that it's a problem that you get to solve. I mean, just a little story from my own life. I came to Seattle and I didn't have any friends for the first year. It was tough, man. Seattle's rainy and depressing. I got a dog, and then I realized I couldn't have a dog, and I gave the dog to a family in Portland. But it was a tough time, and it wasn't until I went to a hiking meetup and decided, okay, well, I apparently don't know how to solve this problem by just doing the same thing over and over again. So I'm going to do things that would be out of the ordinary for me. And I ended up creating I created a meetup for psychology and recruiting. I went on hiking meetups where I met people my age and just hiked with them and was in nature. And then I actively tried to create a group out of that and keep in touch with those people. And I made it my job to connect those people. And I even went as far as to make an Excel spreadsheet of my friends. So the bottom line is that it is a problem that can be solved, but if you are coming into it with the idea that I'm already defeated, then you are you're not going to enjoy solving the problem, and that's going to make the problem way harder to solve. So I would say the idea is I haven't found my place, and for whatever reason, my strategies haven't worked. And that's not a ding against me. I'm not going to take that personally, but I'm going to try other strategies almost as a scientist, where it doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm just going to do things and show up and try to remove all of my issues that I have with myself from the picture and just show up around people and care for them or get involved with them. So that's number one. How do I accept that people in my local comedy scene will never like me for whatever reason without hurting my career chances? First of all, I don't know what your career chances are, but if your career chances are just to be awesome in your local comedy scene, which I assume that it isn't, because you probably can't make much of a career out of as a comedian from just your local coffee scene. But I would say that you should accept, like, first of all, I would say that the idea that people will never ever like you is a defense mechanism that you're using. And again, it sounds like you use a lot of confirmation bias here. Like, I have a very solidified view of how I am lacking, and I don't really question that much. Look for evidence of people that do like you, a smile, someone patting you on the back for a joke or whatever it is. And as far as it hurting your career chances, I think that the idea, if you're just good at something and you are able to go out there and kill it, or you have a material that is good enough to be like enjoyed on a large scale, then it probably doesn't fucking matter where you are. Like, if you can kill it in one area, you can kill it in another area, just because the material is what's killing it. It's not necessarily like your community's view of you. It's possible that you're in a community, like if your jokes are super raunchy and you're like in Seattle like me, then it's like, yeah, this is a really PC place, so your jokes are going to be, overly judged, and fuck those people. But, maybe that's not the best environment. And for your career, you might want to move somewhere else. I certainly did for my career. But I would say that just continue to refine your craft for you. Continue to focus on what you think is important because you think it's important. And then try and let go of the outcome. And if people don't like you, man, that's fucking great material for a comedian. This sounds like it could be hilarious. Not that your problems are hilarious, but this sounds like the pain that great comedy could be extracted from. So, yeah. Anyways, hope that was helpful. See ya.